to Ga-Rankuwa in Pretoria, where that event was taking place. And the vision, the grand vision there, Govan Whittle's GGT 2030, Growing Gauteng Together 2030, 7 priorities being outlined, issues around infrastructure and the township economy, but not a word about the e-tolls, Govan.
Yeah, he was scant on detail regarding one of the most controversial projects in the province, but it was a speech that was laden with announcements and big plans for Gauteng, least among them, of course, the Township Economic Development Bill, which will be tabled in the Gauteng Provincial Legislature in June. That, of course, an historic move. And then the decision and announcement by David Makhura that he's opening up his entire cabinet to lifestyle audits, and that'll even extend to lower officials through being vetted by the state security agency. So there's a lot to get through to Lasizwe. Let me bring in the ANC Chief Whip in Gauteng, Mr. Mzi Khumalo. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Khumalo. There's plenty to discuss, but what's your brief takeaway overall from the speech by the Premier today?
Thank you very much. Firstly, we want to welcome the speech by the Premier, particularly the fact that it was not only about the speech, he also submitted the plan, which is very encouraging, because in most cases we just listen to the big ideas without narrowing them down to plan. We are particularly encouraged by the fact that the Growing Gauteng Together plan is underpinned by infrastructure rollout as part of economic development. Infrastructure rollout, particularly to those programs and projects that are already in existence. For instance, herein one will think about the housing projects that could not move at the speed required, because at the core of it is this problem of infrastructure. Because
and I just want to come in there with the infrastructure. There's a big focus on private public partnerships when it comes to raising the funds for these 100 new schools, these 6 new hospitals that will be built. But do you have the private partners that will raise the money to build all of these ambitious new projects?
Indeed, we have in South Africa, we have in Gauteng. If you look at the speech of the Premier, he spoke about and emphasized the issue around the social compact that we need to build. That's for us a good starting point, but also mobilizing private sector for them to play a role. If we want to be serious in rolling out this infrastructure, we need to go beyond government itself, and therefore ensuring that practically we involve the private sector. As I said, we're encouraged by the plan itself. The creative model that the Premier referred to, we're going to be looking at that model very closely, and if it helps and it works in Gauteng, why not in local government, because that's where you also are facing a difficulty in terms of development being rolled out.
Of course, you're talking about the partnership between the Gauteng provincial government, the President's Infrastructure Office and the municipalities, which would be funding or essentially getting the funds for these big infrastructure projects. The Premier is subjecting his executive to lifestyle audits. He says they're ready to take them, and he's going a step further, saying that the head of departments and officials in the supply chain management units in the municipalities should be vetted by state security. This hasn't been done in South Africa before. What do you make of this step?
Well, firstly, we want to move away from welcoming that announcement by the Premier because it has happened on numerous occasions. As the ANC caucus, what we are saying is that there must be implementation, particularly to senior managers and senior politicians. There must be implementation. We are encouraged by the bold step taken by the Premier that let's go to junior staff, particularly those who are in supply chain management. For instance, how do you answer a question wherein a junior official drives a big car on the weekends, Ferrari, whatever the model is? How do you explain that? If you look at the salary that they're earning and what they are able to be driving. But if you want to kill corruption, yes, we started correctly that senior people must be vetted, including ourselves as senior politicians. But let's go to the core. at much junior level. We will look at because there's regulations around that, the Intelligent Act itself and so on, whether it accommodates such a level of junior men. But
let me just get in finally, because we're out of time, Mr. Khumalo. The Premier says he's expecting an imminent announcement on e-tolls from the President. Gauteng ANC has said that they believe the upgrades can be paid for without passing on a toll to the motorists. If the President announces that Gauteng motorists should pay the e-tolls, will the ANC in Gauteng support that, or will you campaign against that announcement by the President?
Look, our starting point is that we don't want e-tolls in whatever form. So the question that you ask me will be e-toll in another form. What we're interested in will look interestingly on the announcement itself. We don't want to be ahead of ourselves. We'll wait for the announcement by the President, and we'll engage that announcement. The announcement from where we are should be in line with the resolution that we took as Gauteng, because we wanted to offload the burden out of the people of Gauteng. But if you find another way of bringing that load to the people of Gauteng, we will not be able to accept.
Thank you so much, Mr. Khumalo, hinting that the President may announce that we shouldn't have to pay for those e-tolls bills. Well, Tula Sizwe, you'll appreciate that Mr. Khumalo is the chief whip of the governing party, same party that Mr. David Makhura belongs to. And I've got Mr. Solly Mapaila here, if you'll indulge me for just a moment. Sorry, Mr. Solly Msimanga, not Mr. Solly Mapaila from the SCCP, but the head of the opposition in the Gauteng legislature, Mr. Solly Msimanga, if you can just join me here briefly. There's a speech with a lot of promises being made and announcements of big actions being taken by David Makhura. What's your overall take from it?
Well, Premier David Makhura didn't disappoint in what I said he would do yesterday. Same old, same old. We're hearing nothing new. I can give you a lot of examples in his speech. I mean, he's talking about the Aerotropolis, something that we spoke about 10, 12 years ago. He's speaking about the Roslyn hub now becoming the new automotive city. In 2017, when I was the mayor, I already launched that. We already have agreements in place. He's speaking about having an integrated transport ticketing system. Old news again. 2017 May, I launched that. There's already a ticket. I think I need to take him a ticket on Thursday and show him how the ticket works, so that it can actually be rolled out throughout the Gauteng. So there's nothing new that we had today. The thing that was very revealing for me is this. Towards the end of his speech, he says, if we are to do things right, we can actually achieve a lot by even using 2010 prices. What is then admitting is that in the last 10 years, we have bloated prices so much and been paying so much for services and goods that government is procuring, that if we were to do it right, we can actually use 2010 prices. Isn't that a revelation on its own? And we are now asking, what are you doing about it? We've been hearing about lifestyle audits. We've been hearing about ensuring that you get the system, or you get people who are rogue out of the system, but nothing of it has ever come up. Lastly, he then says, we are now, awaiting an imminent response on e-tolls. Last year, when we had the SOPA, same thing was said. Every year it's like there's an imminent announcement to be made, and an imminent announcement to be made, but we never really get into it.
A big part of the speech, Solly, is this big infrastructure spend that they're planning on going on, and the new mechanism involving the President's Infrastructure Office, the municipalities, and the Gauteng government. It relies heavily on private partnerships. What do you make of this? Is this realistic?
It's not. Again, if you were to listen to the last bit of his statement, he says Gauteng will achieve all of that using the 2010 prices, and which means that you have to be growing the economy at about the Gauteng's specific economy at about 7.1%. The current economy in Gauteng is growing at 1.5%. We haven't had what are the plans to really make sure that the economy grows at a faster rate. That's number one. Number two, there's no new money in Gauteng. In actual sense, if you look at our current budget right now, we're sitting at 60 billion rand. He himself admitted that we are going to spend 60 billion rand in the next coming 10 years in building some of this infrastructure, the schools more specifically. So I don't know where this new money is going to be coming from to be building all this new infrastructure. And this is what we're going to be taking to him in a debate on Thursday. And the questions that we're going to be asking. The people of Gauteng are tired of all these empty premises and all the lies and all these dreams that never really seems to be materialized, and all the regurgitation that seems to be taking place year in and year out. And I think it's about time. It's only a matter of time till the people really erupt. And we've seen now in Soweto, we are seeing now all over where people are saying, hang on, we are not really getting to solutions here, but problems keep piling up.
Thank you so much, Mr. Salim Simanga. He's the leader of the DA in Gauteng, and unimpressed by the remarks and promises made by David Makhura in his address. Well, we'll keep speaking to opposition parties as well as MECs as the day goes by. For now, it's back to you, Tulisizo.
All right, Govan Whittles live for us there from Ga-Rankuwa in Pretoria. Let's stay